This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini, a newspaperman for 15 years, a criminal investigator for 28 years in Florida. John Dietz says he can't change a light bulb, but he can write. In his first book for Page, entitled Fallen Prince, he takes all of that investigative experience and explains the Warren Commission's investigation of the JFK assassination. John, we have rehashed this a million times. What made you do this?
Well, it always bothered me. The Warren Commission was the most bizarre criminal investigative body I've ever encountered. And I couldn't figure out why they did what they did. And I studied this case for 50 years, and I refused to write about it until I knew the answer. Well, now I know the answer about the real reason the Warren Commission was created. And it had nothing to do with solving the crime. It had a very important reason, but you have to read the book to find out what it is.
To cover it up.
Not just to cover it up. It was actually designed to prevent something terrible from happening on an international scale. Why was the Warren Commission actually created? Can I tell you?
Yeah.
It was created to prevent World War III.
How so?
Let me explain. Lee Harvey Oswald defected to the Soviet Union in 1959. He stayed there for about a year and a half, and then he came back. And guess who was accused of killing John F. Kennedy? A man who was perceived to be a Marxist spy killed John Kennedy, right? And the Russians, Khrushchev, said, look, we did not put this man up to this. And if you blame us for the death of John F. Kennedy, I'm going to order my troops into West Berlin, and we're going to take over the city. Now, in 1963, if the Russians invaded West Berlin, we would have responded, and that would have been World War III. Khrushchev told Lyndon Johnson, if you put the blame on us, I'm going to move. And so Johnson had to do everything in his power to have Lee Harvey Oswald designated as the sole perpetrator of this terrible crime. And that's why they went out of their way to state that there were no Confederates, that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. But of course, he was shot 3 days after he was arrested. And the reason he was shot was they had to shut him up. They could not allow Lee Harvey Oswald under any circumstances to go to trial.
Okay, so that means they hired this guy from the mafia to take him out.
Organized crime killed John Kennedy. I know the exact person in organized crime who ordered the hit. That's one of the main components of the book. But organized crime was responsible for the death of John Kennedy. And the reason they killed him was John Kennedy declared war on organized crime. When his brother became attorney general, they went after the mob like no administration in the history of the Republic had ever gone after the mob. And they put hundreds of them behind bars. And so the mob was in danger. If John Kennedy had been reelected, he would have doubled down on the mob, and they would have been put out of business.
How do you back up your findings?
With facts, 50 years of research. Plus, I have some powerful friends on my side. Robert Caro wrote 4 books on Lyndon Johnson. They come out every 10 years. They are just phenomenal books. And the last one he wrote gave credence to my theory.
Well, this, I would think, would raise some eyebrows, no? Your book?
I would think so, yeah. Now, my book is a blending of fictional and historical characters. It's not a dry recitation of facts. It's a political thriller. In other words, I intermingle fictional characters with real characters, and that's how I build the story.
You're well known. So you're well known for your detective work, your criminal investigation work, your work as a newspaper guy.
Well, I'm well known in Sarasota. Yes, I've got JohnDietzAuthor.com. John is Jon. There's no H in my name. It's JONDIETZ author.com. And then I've got a Facebook account. Same thing, John Dietz Author. And my email account is johndietz007@gmail.com. And I've received over 100 emails, and they've all been positive.
Well, there's no surprise there. People love this stuff. All right, John, thank you. After spending a lifetime helping people through all kinds of issues, from relationships to depression, it was time for psychotherapist Lila Karub to examine some serious pitfalls in her profession and write Marnie's journals.
I mean, after working with a very disturbed client, realizing things about the profession that I never had come never had come about to me. I just wanted to be a voice for the up and coming new therapists and my colleagues too. Many think that graduate school will teach these pitfalls of the profession, but no college curriculum does that. If you incorrectly bill for your services, or if there's poor record keeping, which could cause a professional therapist, like the client I had, to face insurmountable pressure, like a licensure suspension or loss, or even prison.
So this is Marnie.
Yes, this is Marnie. She was once a psychotherapist, yeah, for about 10 years.
And she participates in 2 decades of crime-related activities.
Correct. But it wasn't all into the therapist herself, it was in her life too. She had done other crimes that are written in the book about survival, like welfare fraud, for instance, long before she was a therapist.
You say she's arrested and charged with grand larceny, facing 21 years in prison. I mean, other felony charges. Did she not know better, or was it just she was trying to keep her head above water?
No, she had an opiate addiction that threw her off course for almost 20 years. So the entire time that she was making her bad decisions and her poor choices, she was trying to get prescriptions, doctor shopping.
You also mentioned the death of a man she was in love with.
Correct. After that man died, her finances began to crumble, and she has to find ways not to lose her life and lose her finances. So the crimes began, and the welfare fraud idea was born. She had kids and she had lack of money.
And she was your client.
She is my client. Yeah, she still will, engage into some psychotherapy with me, even though I don't practice any longer. And she has come a long way. So when someone goes into private practice, there's very little monitoring of their practice. So the licensing board has you take an exam, and they will come from time to time and see how you're doing. And some of the things that will lead to them investigating you is your billing. So say that you are talking to the patient in the middle of the night. You want to bill for that. But up until recently, those kinds of billing was not allowed, or was fraud, in other words. Even though she was doing the time and she was talking to the patient or whatever, it was still not correct. And record keeping as well, as I mentioned earlier, that's a big one for psychotherapists, that they really don't learn that in graduate school, or billing either. Yeah, they just don't learn that stuff.
I'm sure you can be a fabulous psychotherapist and be horribly unorganized.
Correct. But stuff like billing and record keeping, which are two main facets of a psychotherapist. I mean, once they engage in something that wasn't correct, that is reported to the board. And once that happens, you're investigated. And once an investigation happens, they never leave you alone. To Marnie, it happens, and to many therapists, it happens. I guess when you take opiates, it just numbs you. And when you're numb, you think incorrectly, but you can go on. You can survive. You can survive until it becomes which for her became a suicidal mission and ideation. And that's when I met her.
If she had just kept it together enough to keep decent records, they might not have discovered her.
Correct. And one thing that happened to this COVID situation is that they started allowing this kind of telephone counseling, video counseling, which Marnie was a little bit ahead of her time, opiate addiction or not. She was doing that, and she was cited for that and lost her license for that.
And then everybody was doing it.
hmm Because people don't want to go in because of COVID.
Good thing Marnie's had you in her life all this time. Certainly a lot to be learned here. Thanks, Lila. Phyllis Hogan worked in the Mississippi school system before deciding it was time to preserve an important part of Black history in her book, The Beginning and End of John Jefferson High School, Preserving the History of Success.
My book is about preserving the history of John Jefferson High School. See, many of the staff members and all the principals are deceased, and a lot of students are deceased. And during the COVID pandemic, we lost a lot of Jeffersonians to COVID. And the school is now the superintendent of education's office. And it was urgent that the history preserved because our children and children of the church, when they look at John Jefferson High School, all they gonna see and know is the superintendent of education's office. They won't know anything about John Jefferson. I want the world to know that John Jefferson, although it was a segregated school, it was a great school. And we had secondhand books. Everything we had was second. But we got a good education, and many of the graduates of John Jefferson High School, they went on to college and universities and junior colleges, and they got an education. Many of them became teachers, and they are productive members of society, and many of them students, some have written books, some have become politicians and things, some have received their PhD in education. And it's important for people to understand you don't have to have a lot to be a productive citizen in society. You can take limited resources and achieve success in life. I live in a government assistance apartment. I live there, and I'm reading the book Preserving the History of John Jefferson. And you would think someone coming from living in a government assistance apartment wouldn't even be thinking about writing a book or preserving a piece of Black history. And I want to inspire people of all ages. You're never too old to achieve your dream. You can achieve it at any time. All you have to do is work hard, be determined to get it done, and you'll get it done, even if it takes you longer. At the end of the game, it's about achieving your dream.
What happened at John Jefferson High? Was the school closed down?
Yes, ma'am. It was closed down in May of 1970. But a few years later, they did open back up the vocational part of the building, and the students did vocational trade at the school. And then they discontinued, and they built the trade department. It was a two-family house. Mr. White was the vocational trade teacher. Him and his family lived in one side of the house. And Mr. Thomas Todd, he was the second principal of John Jefferson High School. Him and his family lived in the other part. Also, I graduated from the University of Southern Mississippi, and in their alumni magazine, I'm going to be in the spring issue. They have a book list where they list the name of their students who have published a book and list the title of the book so the other alumni members would know.
That's great, Phyllis. You really are an inspiration. Thanks so much. Renee Kencio lives in a tiny Arizona town without traffic lights. Exactly what he says he needed after 4 decades working in Las Vegas casinos. Then he found the time to write his very intriguing family history entitled Slaves to Survival.
I've been drinking espresso all night long waiting for your call.
All night long. That's crazy.
It started with my grandfathers, and their story. Luckily enough, they each, believe it or not, kept a journal. And so I ended up with their journals. So I decided to write that book because after I finished writing that book, I felt like 1,000 pounds lifted up my shoulders,
So it's a story of 2 families.
Yeah. One French, one Italian. Yeah, they both went in Marseille. The Italian guy went to Marseille, and so they went to war with each other, and then they realized that this was not working, so they ended up being partners. And then Hitler in 1933 started saber rattling. So my French grandfather, which I don't call it my grandfather in the book, but Michael had properties in Havana, and he had properties in New Orleans, in Louisiana. So, because his great grandfather was a French pirate by the name of Jean Lafitte. So they moved to Cuba. So they left Europe because of Hitler. They moved to Cuba. They created an incredible gambling, I don't want to call it empire, but they pretty much had it all sewed up. Some people from New York came over, and they went ahead and erected hotels in their properties. And then obviously they ended up with casinos. Then Castro came in, and guess what happened? They had to leave Cuba again. So they left Europe because of Hitler. And then they came to Cuba. And for a long time, of course, they had a great situation in Havana.
Where did the organized crime and the murders and the sex and the pillaging and the executions and political intrigue come in?
That's all in Cuba, and it's in Las Vegas, and it's in Florida as well. No, half of my family went to Florida. That's my father part of the family. My mother's side of the family, and the reason they got married is because they were raised together in Cuba because of my grandfathers, which was Mose and Michael, you know. So they ended up married. So I was born in Cuba. Now you understand why I had to write.
We sure do, James. Thank you. James Earl worked in masonry precast in Branson, Missouri before he decided to start writing, and he takes us on a sci-fi western adventure in his first book, Jimmy's Space Odyssey.
I've written all of my life since I was young, and I roofed houses for 35 years, and I just kept filling notebooks, and I got 6 cardboard boxes full of notebooks. Mama said, do something with them.
6 cardboard boxes. That's a lot.
Yeah, well, it's 35 years or more worth of collecting.
Wow. So what's this story about?
Well, it's a sci-fi fantasy adventure, and it's about the Jeweled Empire, where planets on the border fringe of space are frontier planets. The characters are written with a Louis L'Amour Zangray Western flair. So the character is Ryan Leighton and Ryan Taylor. The planet that they're on is Cantonese, and it's a imperial frontier planet where tech is strictly restricted. And so our hero is just learning who he truly is and finding his path. Since there are big family secrets, one of which is his connection to the imperial line, there's plenty of mystery to uncover in the book.
Okay, who's Two Toes?
Two Toes is the villain. He is a Tigrillian war chief. He's 10 foot tall, and he's a humanoid tiger.
What's the Bloody Muddy?
The Bloody Muddy is Cantonese equivalent to the Mississippi River.
You say that only a half-grown boy with a heart full of vengeance and bottled lightning in both hands stands between the outlaw war chief and the rest of the western frontier. Is that Lightning Ryan Taylor?
That is Lightning Ryan Taylor. There are several girls to begin with because he's young. There's a mixture of them. He has one that is from his home world, and she's my survivor. There's a Psy Lord that has to cross the entire realm in order to give him what he needs. And there's a female Mescalero Star Knight just waiting to kick butt.
What do these people look like?
They look like humans. This is where humanity conquers the Milky Way galaxy through the philosophy of manifest destiny.
So it's Jimmy's Space Cowboy. So who's Jimmy?
I'm Jimmy, Jimmy the storyteller.
Okay. Do you live in this world?
I don't live on Cantonese, but I am the recorder. And I'm just getting the word out. I'm trying to set up a few author direct outlets here in the Branson, West Kimberlin City area of Missouri. So, and you can expect to see some videos from Mama and me in the near future as soon as we figure out how to make them and post them. We have, of course, the author's website at Page Publishing, but then we're going to try to post with the 5 main social media outlets.
Now, does this end here or?
No, book 2's with the author. Book 3, I'm finishing the grand finale on it, and book 4 is framed to chapter 10.
All right, you go, James. Thank you. Jason Bravener is a Pizza Hut delivery driver in Wisconsin. He started writing in high school when he says he probably should have been paying attention. He was just 21 when he started Captain Adventure and the Treasure of the Lost Island of Atlantis, and now he's finally published it.
This has been in the process for over 20 years. It's gone through numerous rewrites, research, everything. Just every time I would look at it again, I would add, subtract, add. I always liked the Indiana Jones movies and the Alan Quatermain stories. And I thought, I would really love to write something where a guy has a treasure map. He goes on a treasure hunt. X marks the spot for the treasure. And it's just a big fantasy adventure. Our main character is named Captain Adventure. The book actually starts when he's a kid, and you find out that he has lived his life with his dad, and his dad was an adventurer too. So all he knows is this life. He's been raised on it. This is what he knows. This is what his dad did, and he wants to follow in the footsteps of his father. And he works for this British museum called The Gentleman. And it's a bunch of British guys who assign certain tasks to various adventurers that work for them. And he gets this mysterious scroll and he presents it to him. And his sponsor, I guess you would call it, is Willem St. John Jameson. And he agrees to send him out. And he puts together his team of his former girlfriend, Rain Lambert, and his other friend, Dante Marino, who is an extreme lover of life. There's an opposing treasure hunter named Peyton Kruger who believes in the purity of the hunt instead of doing it for financial gain. So they're at odds with each other, trying to solve the clues and get to the treasure first. They do find the treasure and the lost island of Atlantis. Basically, I bring it up, people get excited. I know one night after I got back from a delivery, I had mentioned it, and one guy at work was already telling everybody about it. They all wanted to buy a book. I said, well, just, make sure if you buy one, tell your friends, go online, write a review about it. I've got my sister doing promotion for it, so she's really pushing it.
All right, Jason, good start. Thank you. Finally, chronic trauma led Anupa Rayo to start sharing her story online, and then she started sharing stories of the people she works with as a patient advocate. People noticed. They responded and started sharing their stories, and now she's created a community of hope and inspiration that she tells us about in her book, Breakthrough Stories, Poems, and More, to heal and find your higher self through it all.
I have been writing since I learned to write, and it's just been a release because I can't share much or if something's going on. So it was writing was my release. So then it just led to something more after I went through chronic traumas, and then I started helping online mainly. I did go for treatment and all, but I couldn't even open up there with the therapist. So it was just frustrating at myself, not anyone else. They tried to help me, but it was after a really bad low, then I just started sharing 2 lines online. And then I would be wait for someone to be what is this nonsense you're writing? But no, people started relating and following and, reaching out for help. So, because I do mental health and suicide prevention and all that. So, and then it just became I started writing more and more, and it was too much to do it online, on those online platforms. So it led to, this point of writing a book. I had a lot written as it is, so I just had to organize it. It was like torture, but I organized that whole thing. And of course, the publishing, that helped me a lot, so I couldn't have done it alone.
How did people find your stuff?
I started volunteering at the centers, and then I started on Instagram. So then I would post something, use few hashtags. Like I was scared to even post 2 lines because I thought people were going to laugh. So I would use some hashtags, and then people just started following. Like it was just like, I didn't expect that. And then I started sharing like 4 lines, then a paragraph, then it became like 5 pages. And on Instagram, you can't really share that. It's really hard. And then I would do audio, like just speaking like random stuff and post it on Instagram. And it's been a journey. So, ongoing, we're all on this journey. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be like someone has to have a diagnosis even. They could still be struggling, because preventive is just so important to me. So you don't get to that low that I went through, or, many people go through because they can't share or ask for help. So I share stories and poems and scenarios, and then just my own thoughts. And then, it's 17 chapters, and also just suicide prevention. I have a whole chapter on that. And I have a chapter on mental health stories. I write a lot of fiction, but I'm definitely inspired by my own or by the people I help. The first girl that reached out to me online, I wrote a whole story on her and then added, fiction.
So where do people find your stuff?
I'm on Instagram, so Anupa9989.
All right, Anupa, you've just given us a really good example of how just sharing your thoughts online can lead to a following. All right, that is a wrap for this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Find out more about the authors that you hear on this show every single week by going to pagepublishing.com. You can also see more about the books and the authors, or, even buy a copy where fine books are sold online at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, iTunes, Google Play. That's just to name a few. Thanks so much for being here with us or downloading the Page Publishing Book Club. We love that too at 710WOR.com. Check back with us every single week. We got new authors, new ideas, new inspiration just for you. All right. I hope it's feeling like spring wherever you are. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. I'll catch you next time.